Hi, this is Kevin. Welcome to my tutorial on the static files capability of Django. And we're looking at the instructions here for this assignment. And in it, we're going to configure the static files feature of our Django project. We're going to place the static files into a special directory called static, and the file set we're putting in there are CSS style sheets and a PNG file with our logo. And at that point, we're going to have the styling mechanism set up for our app, but up until now we haven't had styling in our web pages. So we're going to have to update most of our template pages in order to include styling hooks in the HTML such that they connect with our CSS pages that we've added using the static feature. Okay, so that's what we're doing. There's a starter files download specifically for this activity, and we'll get to the contents of that in a couple minutes. Okay, so I already have my project up in PyCharm. And let's just take a look at the application in its current state. Okay, so we're going to run the manage .py task and then do a run server to start up the development server. Okay, and we're going to click on the link, and up comes the application. And up until now, we have had just plain old HTML. We've had no CSS. We're getting all the layout that we're getting, all the styling that we're getting is from HTML tags, and just the default styling that those tags get in the browser. And actually, this is not too bad, right? So styling with CSS is not a major emphasis of this course. In fact, you could even say it's not an emphasis of this course at all. So I'm going to give you the CSS. I'm going to give you the changes to the HTML because we're concentrating on the Django. Okay. So that's what we have right now. Right now, we don't have too many buttons. Okay, if you look at what we have, let's go to instructors. So if you go to instructor list, if you want to create a new instructor, instead of having a button for it, we just have a plain old link. Okay. And if we click on a particular instructor, if we want to edit the instructor or delete the instructor, again, we don't have a button, and we typically have buttons for things like that, but we have those rendered as a link right now. If we decide we want to edit, we do get a button here, but it's not a very pretty one. It says update instructor. If we go back and we say we want to delete, we've got the same thing here. Instead of two buttons, we have a link and a button. That's kind of lopsided, and the button's not as attractive as it might be. And the other place where we have a button, I think, let's just go say we want to create a new instructor. There's a button down here. Again, not a particularly pretty one, but a button all the same. So we've essentially got the default styling that comes with plain old HTML, and we're going to upgrade to better layout and styling. Okay, and in this particular class, we're using the textbook Django Unleashed. When I say this particular class, I mean the teaching that we're doing of this in the spring of 2021. We probably won't be using the Django Unleashed text by Andrew Pinkham forever because it's getting on the older side. But what we've done is that we take the approach to styling that he uses in that book, and we borrowed a lot of the code that came with that book. Okay. And why did we do that? Well, because we're not really emphasizing layout and styling in this course. All right. Okay. So what does he use for layout and styling? Well, he uses this layout platform called Skeleton, which is really lightweight. It's not super popular, but it's easy to learn and easy to understand. He uses a CSS add-on called Normalize, which claims to dampen out the differences in rendering that you get from browser to browser. Okay, and those are the two things that we're going to use. And if you want some details on how they work and all that kind of stuff, the place to do, to find out about those things is probably to dive in to the Pinkham book and look at the information there. Okay. All right. So what do we have to do first? Let's just give that a close for right now. Okay. We need to provide for static files. Oh, before we talk about that, let's look at the files that we're getting in our starter files. Okay. So this is the zip file that I have available for you to download, and I've unzipped it. Okay. And it's got two main sub directories. One's called static and the other was called templates. Templates should be something that you recognize. We have a templates directory in our course info application, and the directory structure looks like this. And then we've got a bunch of pages, a bunch of Django templates, and we are updating all of these. Okay, we're just going to copy them over top of the ones that we have, and the only thing that we're really changing is we're adding styling hooks into the pages, and in the base page we're adding a reference to the CSS style sheets. So we're just changing the templates so that they work with the CSS. Okay, so when we get to that point, we're just going to copy all these in. The other thing that we're doing is that we are going to create another directory in our project called static, and the directory layout for this kind of a directory is kind of parallel to what we do for templates. So we have static, then course info, and then our static files. And the static files we have here are the logo that we're going to use, normalize.css, which is the tool that is supposed to dampen out the rendering differences between the browsers. skeleton.css, which is a simple platform for style and layout, and then style.css, which has the CSS that's just particular to our own application. And style.css got its start from the Pinkham book. I've added a few extra styles to it to kind of patch up the styling to make our site look good, but I haven't done a whole lot of work on it. Okay, so what we're going to concentrate on first are these static files. Okay, what do we mean by static files? Well, these are files that just get served up. They get sent to the browser exactly as they are. So what kind of files are they? Image files, style sheets, those kinds of things. Every time the browser goes to render one of our pages, it sees references to those in our base.html file. And so then it asks the server, well, if it doesn't have a recent copy of that file, it asks the server to send one. Okay. Now, we treat these files a little differently from the rest of the files that we have here, like the templates, and that's because it's a common practice, and I think a good one, to not serve static files, these non-changing files, not serve them from your web application server. Okay, not serve them from Django. Well, what would you serve them from? Well, a typical production installation for a Django application uses a web server like the Apache HTTP server or Nginx or Internet Information Server from Microsoft. It uses that on the front end, and then it passes through the requests that have to be served by Django. And typically, we configure it so that it serves the static files directly itself. And why do we do that? Well, we use that to take the load off of the Django server. Okay? The Django server can serve up static files, and when we're using the development server like we are now, you're going to see that it does actually serve up static files for us when we're doing development. But when we put this into production, we're going to collect up all the static files into one spot, okay, and then we're going to tell our front-end HTTP server where they are, and we're going to ask it to serve those directly. Okay, that's why we're doing this. Okay, we don't have to do that for templates. Well, because they're not static. Okay, they get filled in. We need Django to fill them in, but not these things up here that I've highlighted. So that's what we're doing. So how do we do this? Well, within our project, we're going to go now and we're going to create a directory called static under our project, and under that one called course info, and then we're going to copy the files into that. So let's do that. Okay, so let's see. We have migrations, we've got templates, we have that high-level sort of metadata directory, all that kind of stuff. So let's go up on our app, course info, right-click, say we want a new directory. and the name is just going to be static, all lowercase. Okay, now we're going to highlight that, right click, and say we want a new directory. Okay, and that's going to be the name of our app again, called Course Info. And this is sort of a confusing way that things are organized in Django. It's a way we organize things that get aggregated for the whole Django installation. It turns out it's a little confusing to the beginner, but it's a pretty good scheme overall. And now I'm just going to come back and I'm going to highlight in, I'm working in the Finder because I'm in Mac OS, but you should be able to do this in your, on Windows 10 in the File Explorer. Just highlight these 4 files, right click and say you want to copy them, okay? And we can highlight the directory we want to put them in and right click on that and say we want to paste. And we can just say okay. And if we open that directory now, we'll see that we have logo, normalized, skeleton, and style. Okay, that's great. Are we done yet? No, we're not done yet. Okay. Two things have to happen with the files that we put there. One is that those have to be seen in our templates. Oh, okay, so we're going to do that in a couple of minutes. Yeah, the other thing is when we get into production, we want to be able to aggregate all the static files into one place. And there is a feature for that in our manage.py. Okay? And we use a command in manage.py called collect static. C-O-L-L-E-C-T, static. Okay, so we say collect static and enter. And it says you've requested to collect static files as the destination in your settings. Okay, do you really want to do this? Well, this is going to fail because we really didn't give it enough information in the settings. Yes, but just type in yes and enter, and it blows up. And it says improperly configured, you're using Staticfiles app. Okay, and then down here, you're using the Staticfiles app without having set static root in your file system. We need to set static root in settings.py. Okay, let's go find settings.py. That's down here in our sort of metadata directory, and we'll open up that. And these are usually all the way at the bottom. So you can see that we do have an entry called static URL, and that says that the directory that holds our static files is called static. Okay, that's going to be enough that Django is able to find it when we're rendering the page, but this isn't enough information to tell it where to aggregate all of the static files. Okay, so I'm going to go over to my already baked version and open up my settings.py, and I'm going to copy that entry over here, and you're going to copy it into yours. Okay, so right under static URL, here's what we want to put. Okay, we want to say static root gets assigned os.path.join base dir static. if you look here, you see this red squiggly underline. We need an import. So let's hover over that. And it says import OS. And that's what we want. There's a package called OS. Okay? And it imported that. All right, so this should be enough to solve it. Let's just go look up at the imports. You can see that it did import OS for us. Okay? All right, so that should be all the changes that we need. And of course, we click off the change that we made and it should save it. Now we should be able to go back here, okay, and say collect static. Okay. Okay, and it did it. It took 136 static files, were copied to the directory static within our project. This isn't the one within our app. Wow, that's a lot. How many did we have in course info? We only had 4, and yet it found 136. So it found 132 other static files. Where did they come from? Well, when you do this collect static, it goes to all the apps that you're using, all the Django apps that you're using, the ones that you wrote and the ones that are part of the Django distribution, like auth and admin and those kinds of things. It goes through all them and it aggregates their static files as well, because we want to serve all the static files with the front-end HTTP server when we get into production. So let's just see where those all went. Okay, if we go up in our list here, okay, we can see that not under course info, but all by itself at the same level as course info, we have a directory called static now, and we have an entry, we have a sub directory for each app that we're using. Course info, which we created, and admin, which was created by the Django folks. Okay, and if we look in course info, well, we're going to see our 4 files. If we look in admin, we're going to see, well, there's some CSS files, a whole bunch. There's some fonts. There's some images, a whole bunch of images, and there's some JavaScript. Okay, these are all the kinds of things that are static, unchanging, and that we want to offload the serving in production, not in development, but we want to offload the serving to the front-end HTTP server. Okay, so this is all in the right place. Now, are you done? Not completely. Here's why. Do you have a file called Git Ignore in your project? If you're using Git, and maybe by this time you should be using Git, remember that you're going to have to use it in order to do your installation, right? If we go to Git Ignore, okay, this is a list of the files, or these are actually patterns for identifying the files that we don't want to put under version control. So it says we don't want static under version control. So here's what I say. If you don't have a Git Ignore file yet, and it's .git ignore because it's one of those hidden files, right? If you don't have one yet, then add one and configure it like this. Okay, this is pretty much like the Git Ignore file that was used in the Django Girls assignment, except that the Django Girls also included in this list the database. this db.sqlite3. I don't like to do that because I do like to keep the development database under version control. So this, I think, is probably these are the values that were in the Git Ignore from Django girls, and the only thing that we've taken out is db.sqlite3. Okay, now why do we want to put this under version control? Well, if you really think about this, this directory, okay, is an aggregation of all the static subdirectories that are in each of the apps. So this is really duplicate information, okay? And this collect static feature is not something that we use in development. It's something we use in production, and it's something that we use manage.py for when we're configuring a production server, okay? So we don't really want to, we do when we're in development, we want to practice to make sure it works, okay? But when we go to production and we deploy to the production server, we're going to run collect static on that server there, okay? And we may have a different setting about where it's going to go. If we go back to settings.py, okay, this puts this in our project, okay? It could be in a whole other directory in the server, okay? It could be in some place that's not even in our project. So some sort of common areas that we put static files into for serving. So the short of it is we don't keep these under version control, okay? So if we go back to Git Ignore, you'll see that we're not keeping this static files directory in the repository, okay? And that's the right thing to do. All right, so if you made all those changes, we're fully configured. Let's crank up the development server with the run server. Okay, and we'll click on this. And we're still not styled. Okay, we don't have either layout or styling. And why is that? Well, we have access to the CSS pages, but we're not using them yet. And why aren't we using them? Well, let's just look. Okay, we'll stop that for now. Okay, let's just look at some of our templates. Okay, the first one is base.html. Okay, if we were going to have CSS styling, we would have references to our style sheets in the head. There are none. Okay, so we're not even pointing to the CSS. If we look down here at the header, we're not pointing to the logo. Okay, if we look down here, oh, I think that's it for here. Okay, let's go to instructor list. Okay, let's go to instructor list. At the top of instructor list, okay, is a link for creating a new instructor. Okay, right now that gets rendered as a link with coloring and an underline. We'd like it to be a button. We haven't added any styling hooks in here for that either. So we have to update a lot of our pages. So we're going to do that now. Okay, where are the templates that we want to update? Again, it's almost every one. It's everything but the refuse, delete pages. They didn't have a button on them. Everything else had at least a button, and we had to give you a new version of it. So again, if you're working in Mac OS, well, you'll be working in the Finder here. If you're working in Windows, you'd be working in the File Explorer. Uh, Come down here to this course info sub directory and highlight all of the template files, and then right click and say that you want to copy. Okay. And now let's go over to our project and go to templates course info and highlight the course info subdirectory and right click and say that we want to paste. And so now it's asking us, do we want to copy the specified files? And we're going to say okay. And do we want to overwrite? And again, we have a whole lot of files there. I'm going to click overwrite for all. Now on Windows, the dialog will be a little different, but I'm sure that you can do that. So we do that, and now we have overwritten all of our pages. So let's go look at them. Let's look at base.html. Okay, now here's the deal I want to make with you. Okay, I did all of the typing. Okay, I want you to pay attention to the changes that were made so that you can understand how we have to change the pages. So please listen up at this point. I was nice enough to do all the typing for you. Please look at what the differences are. Okay? So, in the base.html, and I'm going to close this window down here so we can see more. We have added in the head 3 style sheets. We have one for normalize, we have one for skeleton, and we have one for style. Okay, so skeleton is the styling and layout platform that we're using. Normalize promises to minimize the rendering differences for our pages across browsers, and style.css is our own CSS. Okay. So we've added those 3. What else have we done? Well, we have to tell it to get access to the static files. So we have a template tag up at the very top that says load static. So that's how this page gets access to the static files. And when we point to them, they get linked up. Okay. Okay. Do we make any other changes? Yeah, we did. So you get down here and you can see, for instance, here's the header as we get down into the page itself. So typical for these kinds of styling and layout tools, you tell it everything you want about the styling and the layout as values of a class attribute. Okay, so we say that we want this to be offset by 110 columns. Okay, that means something to skeleton. We say that we want a logo right here. This actually puts the image in here because the style sheet, if we go and look at the style sheet, we should probably do that. If we go up and look at our style.css, we'll find logo in here, and logo actually points to the file. Okay, so that's how that happens. Okay, and this is it. So so the combination of the standard classes that are part of the skeleton CSS, and then this is just a normal class from our style.css page, gets the job done. Okay, I don't think we have too many other changes. Oh yeah, we do. We've got oh yeah. So we've got some things with 8 columns, some things with 4 columns, some things with 12 columns, all these kinds of things. I've got a, yeah. So I don't think I have anything more to say about that. Another thing that I've done in base.html is I've expanded the footer to give credit to the author of Django Unleashed and Skeleton and this normalize, such that distinguishing the property rights, the intellectual property rights, that from distinguishing my code from code that I've borrowed. A typical good thing to do in a footer. Okay, so that's the base.html page. Let's take a look at a list page. So let's look at instructor list. Okay, so here's instructor list. Okay, the only thing that we've done is that we've come in here and we've added a class attribute to the link to tell it to render it as a big pretty button, which is a button space button primary. Okay, we gave it that, and it comes out as a big pretty button. You'll see that in a minute. So we did that. If you go to the instructor detail page, let's look at that. Okay, so we've got 2 buttons at the top. Okay, and again, we just had to add the class for that kind of a button to get the kind of rendering that we're looking for. The other problem that we had was that these things are in an unordered list and they were getting bullets. So I created a style in our own style.css that suppresses the bullets. So if you look at style.css, there's a style way down at the bottom called EZU button list that it takes away the bullet, and it takes away the padding, and it takes away the margin. Okay. Okay. So that was instructor detail, right? The things that we're changing all have to do with the list of buttons that we have. And then we can look at instructor form. Okay, so we had a button for create instructor, but it wasn't a pretty one, so we added the class to make it a pretty one. Okay, we have instructor form update. We had the same thing. We had an update instructor button, but it wasn't a colored pretty one, so we added the class attribute to get that to work. And then we have instructor confirm delete, where we had a link for cancel, and we had a button for delete instructor. And what we did is we added this a class equal button primary to the link, and that causes it to be rendered as a button. Okay, and then we added that same class to the button such that it transforms from an unpretty button to a pretty button. Okay, so this should be all the changes that we need to make. Let's go see if it works. Okay, so I'm going to go up and start the manage.py task. Okay, I'm going to do a run server. Okay, and I'm going to click on the link. And here we go. We have a prettier application that we had before. Okay, so we've got both layout and styling. We have our logo up here. Look at the nav links that we have. We used to have an unordered list of nav links. Now they're rendered as a proper nav bar. If you want to see the styles for those, go look in styles.css. I'm sorry, style.css, and you'll see there's a bunch of style rules here for the nav links. Okay, so it's pretty cool stuff. Okay, this style.css is, I remember, the only thing that wasn't written by Pinkham and his collaborators is this one rule at the bottom. Okay, I think that's the only thing I did. I may have done a second rule. Okay. One of the things that you may want to think about for your own project, two possibilities. One, you don't have to style it at all. Okay. Two, if you style it, I suggest that you don't put a lot of development effort into it, because there aren't any points here. But if you wanted to make it look as good as the Pinkham one, well, just take the code that we have here, or take the code that came with the Pinkham book, and borrow the styling and layout approach from that. Again, well, for your final project, there are not going to be a lot of points for this, for styling. I mean, there are the points for styling have to do with do you have a reasonably do you have a page that's easy to read and easy to follow? That could be the version that we saw when we started this tutorial, the one that didn't have any CSS at all. Okay, so don't put a lot of effort into CSS. If you're going to have it, borrow the Pinkham stuff. Okay. All right. So that's that. So let's go back and look at this. So let's go to instructors. Okay. So now we have a button for create new instructor. Let's click on this. And we go to the create instructor page. It had a button, but it wasn't a pretty one. Okay, so we can do, let's add instructor Aaron Adams. I wanted them to sort to the top of the list. So we add them. Okay. What happens if we go to edit? Well, we've changed that page to, it's got a pretty button. So let's add one more A in the beginning of Adams and update the instructor. That should work. What happens if we say we want to delete the instructor? Well, then we should go to the confirmation page. And again, we had a not so pretty button for a delete instructor, but we had a link for cancel. That's been rendered as a button. So now we've got two buttons. If we cancel, we go back to where we were. And if we say that we want to delete, then it deletes it and we go back to the page. Okay, so we've done that for all of these. Okay, they should all work. You should test them all and you're done. Okay, so that's it for static files, and that's it for styling and layout. These are important features to have, but they're not really, the styling and layout are not features that we concentrate on this course. If you want to get good at styling and layout, you probably want to take another course or buy a book or take a tutorial, okay? But this should be enough styling and layout to take care of that. And then the static files capability put you in the position to serve your static files from the front-end HTTP server when you get into production. And that's kind of fiddly to set up, but at the same time, it's considered a best practice. So I'm going to want you to know how to do this. So I'm going to leave you to get this all done for your own project, and I'll say bye until next time. Bye-bye.